It was an international search and rescue operation that captivated the world.
They've got a lot of people heading over there and helping, but the field in which they're looking is massive.
But these voyagers in the deep were taking a terrible risk.
Anyone in the exploration business of the deep sea expected this to happen. We knew this was going to happen at some point along the way.
The promise of adventure at this fabled site would end in disaster.
On June 18th, 2023, Titan, a submersible operated by Oceangate, went missing in the international waters in the North Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada. The submersible was on a tourist expedition to view the wreckage of the RMS Titanic with 5 individuals on board, including the founder and CEO of Oceangate, Stockton Rush. Due to the estimated 3 days of oxygen supply, there was a huge rescue effort by the US Coast Guard and Canada's Coast Guard, which was unsuccessful until early on June 22nd, when evidence of the wreckage of the vessel started to emerge, leading to the tragic conclusion that the vessel imploded in the ocean depths and there were no survivors.
My worst fears, as of Monday, have now been realized. 2 friends of mine are gone.
St. John's, Newfoundland is a rocky outpost on the edge of the North Atlantic. It's deep water port used by fishermen and traders and adventurers heading to the wreckage of RMS Titanic. On Friday, 16th of June, a supply ship called Polar Prince slipped out of the harbour, setting a course for the southeast. On board, an experimental craft, a submersible, built by a company called Oceangate. Their revolutionary structure, called Titan, would make the ocean depths accessible to all. The hull, made from carbon fibre with titanium ends, and it boasted the largest viewport on the market. The founder was a maverick engineer called Stockton Rush.
I'd like to be remembered as an innovator. I think it was General MacArthur said, "You're remembered for the rules you break." And I've broken some rules to make this. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did.
But a trip on Titan came at a price, around $250,000 per ticket. And joining Mr. Rush on this trip to the Titanic were the following self-described mission specialists. Briton Hamish Harding, he'd made a fortune as an aviation broker in Dubai. Paul-Henri Nagelet, a French adventurer who helped to run a company that exhibited items recovered from the site of the Titanic. And they were joined by a father and son, businessman Shahzada Dayoud and his 19-year-old son Suleiman, both British citizens. Shahzada's sister said the trip was really important to her brother.
It was a Father's Day thing. It was a bonding experience. And, he wanted the adventure of a lifetime, just like his father did, because his father wanted it. And that was Sulti all the way. He would do anything for anyone.
We've traced the supply ship's movements with Marine Tracker. The Polar Prince, with the submersible on board, took 46 hours to reach the site of the Titanic, 380 miles from St. John's. But when they arrived, the weather was poor, something Hamish Harding wrote about on Instagram. The worst weather in Newfoundland in 40 years, he said, but a weather window has just opened up and we're going to attempt a dive tomorrow. They planned to make their descent at 4 a.m. on Sunday, but the start time was delayed. They began the dive at 8. These pictures, taken from the Polar Prince, are the last images we have of the vessel. 1 hour and 45 minutes later, Polar Prince lost contact with the vessel. Almost 10 hours later, the supply ship raised the alarm, informing the US Coast Guard that Titan had gone missing. Nobody had ever dealt with a situation like this. There was a missing 22-foot submersible in waters 4 kilometers deep, with no plan and no vessel to conduct a rescue. The US Coast Guard needed help.
This is a complex search effort which requires multiple agencies with subject matter expertise and specialized equipment.
The Canadians offered planes, the French had equipment, and the British personnel, and a host of private companies offered support, but the weather was atrocious. On the first day of the search, ships and planes reported zero visibility.
We don't think about air pressure because at sea level it's just 14.7 pounds per square inch. That pressure is the result of the column of air that reaches above us all the way into outer space. All those air molecules above us pushing down result in that pressure. But water is a much more dense fluid than air. So for every 10 meters or 32.8 feet you dive, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere or 14.7 psi. The Titanic is sitting on the ocean floor at about 12,500 feet below sea level. The two broken parts of the ship, the bow and the stern, are more than 2,600 feet apart and surrounded by debris after over 100 years of being in the bottom of the ocean. The wreckage is 400 miles off the coast of Newfoundland in Canada. You can see here. Let's put this depth into perspective. Imagine laying on your back with a 1 foot by 1 foot board, okay? And how much weight you would feel on that board. At 100 meters, the size of a soccer or football field, we have the pressure of 10 atmospheres or 145 psi, which means on that 1 by 1 foot board, we would feel the weight of 20,880 pounds. That is 4.7 Tesla Model Ys. At 381 meters, 1,250 feet, we have the height of the Empire State Building in New York City. At this depth, we would feel 37.4 atmospheres of pressure, and that 1 by 1 foot board would feel the weight of 80,000 pounds. At 490 meters, we have the max dive depth of the C class of US Navy submarine. Here, we'd feel 48.5 atmospheres of pressure. That 1 by 1 foot board would feel the weight of 94,800 pounds. At 828 meters, we have the height of the Burj Khalifa. Here, we'd feel 82 atmospheres. That weight on the board would be 173,520 pounds. Now, this is around the same depth as the deepest diving submarine in operation today, the Oscar-class submarine in the Russian Navy. At 3,800 meters sits the wreckage of the Titanic. Here, the pressures are 376 atmospheres. That 1 by 1 foot board on our chest would have the weight of 797,000 pounds. The Oceangate Titan was rated for a mass dive depth of about 4,000 meters. Now that might sound insane, but actually it's not even the record for the deepest human beings have been. That honor goes to James Cameron and the Deep Sea Challenger built in Australia in 2012. The Deep Sea Challenger reached the deepest part of the Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean, the deepest point on Earth, at a mind-boggling 11,000 meters or 36,000 feet. Here, we'd feel 1,090 atmospheres of pressure, and that 1 by 1 foot board would have the weight of 2.3 million pounds on it. Compare that to the difference in pressure of an airplane at cruising altitude of 36,000 feet, where outside the pressure might be 3 psi, and on the inside, between 10 and 12. And that hopefully puts in perspective why more people have been to space than have been into the deepest parts of our oceans. Now let's talk about the red flags that plagued Oceangate from the get-go. By the way, Oceangate just sounds like a walking scandal ready to happen. First, the design limitations of the Titan required that the hatch be bolted down by 17 to 18 bolts from the outside. This means there's no way for the passengers inside to open the hatch. They'd have to rely on ground crews to open it. Now, this is understandable because these deep sea vessels have to be incredibly tight. They have to be very strong. The water seals have to hold, and that's all complicated. But I think this shows you why it's really important to have backup systems and have some sort of an explosive detonation cord you can pull to blow the hatch in the event that the craft surfaced and no one found it. And that was actually one of the fears early on, is that the vessel could actually surface and be at the surface somewhere along the Atlantic unfound and still die from suffocating because they couldn't open the hatch and the air could run out. The Titan also didn't have GPS or other navigational instruments on board, and it didn't have a locator beacon either, like a black box on an aircraft. Most subs use GPS for near-surface navigation, which doesn't work in deeper waters. In deeper waters, they use dead reckoning course information obtained by the ship's gyro compass, measured speed, and estimates of local ocean currents. They also rely on inertial navigation systems, which is an estimated position source utilizing acceleration, deceleration, pitch, and roll from the computers that transmit this data. The Titan, in contrast, appeared to rely only on data provided by the surface support vessel. In 2019, Oceangate published a blog post explaining why the Titan was not certified by any ship authority, which is a huge red flag. Oceangate stated, "The vast majority of marine and aviation accidents are actually a result of operator error, not mechanical failure, and argued that classification focused solely on the physical state of the vessel and not the corporate actions, which are characterized as a constant committed effort and a focused corporate culture of maintaining high-level operational safety. That sounds like absolute bullshit to me. I'm sorry. Journalist David Progue, who rode on the Titan to view the Titanic in 2022, noted during his expedition, the surface support vessel lost track of the Titan for about 4 to 5 hours and mentioned that adding a locator beacon was actually discussed during this event. They could still send short text to the sub, but they had no idea where it was. It was quiet and very tense, he says, and they shut off the ship's internet to keep us from tweeting. Oh my God, that is terrifying, and they've already known that this could happen. The craft was also controlled by a video game controller, which sounds like some cool Silicon Valley way of thinking, beanbag chairs and break rooms, but it's downright stupid. Military spec products go through incredible rigorous testing, making them safe in all operating environments. For example, as expensive as Apple's Vision Pro headset is at $3,500, it is downright cheap compared to the $400,000 that it costs to get a helmet for the F-35 fighter jet. And the reason why, well, lower volumes, of course, but also because they have to go through unbelievable vibration testings to make sure the wells will all hold up, make sure that the higher levels of radiation at 40 to 50,000 feet won't do any damage long term, and to make sure absolute reliability. Now let's talk about how we got to the Titan. Oceangate started by purchasing Antipodes, which is a submersible back in 2012, which was their first test bed for testing and learning about this entire endeavor. Next, they built Cyclops 1, which is in collaboration with University of Washington's Applied Physics Laboratory. And this was a deeper sea vessel capable of reaching a max depth of 500 meters. Still nowhere near deep enough for the Titanic, but this was their next step and their next iteration. In the early design, the hull was made of carbon fiber, and the whole submersible would dive vertically with pivoting seats to ensure the passengers remained upright. Now, it was said that Boeing worked with Oceangate and the University of Washington on their initial design analysis, but we'll get back to that in a second because there's a little bit more to that story. Finally, they would arrive at the Titan, their final product that would actually be rated for 4,000 meters. One of the key takeaways about the Titan is that this is a carbon fiber and titanium hulled submersible. Now, this is really exotic in the world of materials. We've been using high strength steel and aluminum for a long time, and we have data, engineering data on how they fail and what to look for and test methodologies. But carbon fiber is still quite exotic. In fact, any car you've ever driven probably doesn't have much carbon fiber in it. The only exceptions are really, really high-end supercars, or even in the case of aviation, more recently, with the Boeing Dreamliner. But before that, we've always used aluminum and titanium and other materials like that. So just generally, there's less known about it, and it's also really difficult to make sure that you get it right. Oceangate signed a contract with Spencer Composites in January 2017 for the carbon composite cylinder. This was the same company that built the composite pressure hull for the single-person Deep Flight Challenger for Steve Fawcett. After Fawcett passed away, Deep Flight Challenger was acquired by Richard Branson's Virgin Oceanic, which had announced plans to conduct a series of 5 dives to the deepest points of the ocean. But Deep Flight refused to endorse the plan as the craft had been designed to dive only once. This is important. We'll get back to this in a second. In a statement, they said the problem is the strength of the Deep Flight Challenger does decrease after each dive. It's strongest on the first dive, said Adam Wright, the firm's president. It was designed to set the record, dive to the deeps, and then be retired as an exhibit in the Smithsonian. This is a really crucial part because sometimes in engineering, what it comes down to is the operational lifetime and understanding it. And this might have been at play here. So after the disappearance of the Titan in 2023, the University of Washington stated that APL, their Applied Physics Laboratory, had no involvement in design, engineering, or testing of the Titan submersible. A Boeing spokesperson also said that Boeing was not a partner on the Titan and did not design or build it. A NASA spokesperson said that NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center had a Space Act agreement with Oceangate, but did not conduct testing and manufacturing via its workforce or facilities. Basically, all of these partnerships that they had are now being revealed that they were not really partnerships. This is a classic example of a company trying to get credibility by partnering with NASA.